We are taking our second look at New Florence, Pennsylvania. This will be the second and final look as Slick and Shiny Productions once again takes you to the days of yesteryear in one of the local communities. This is New Florence, a place up in the northeast corner of Westmoreland County. This over here on this side is Westmoreland County. This is Cambria County over here. This is Johnstown. Over here that I'm circling, that is New Florence. Now we're going to come in on it a little bit. Okay. This is Johnstown over here. Cambria County over here. On this side of the line you have Westmoreland County. Over here you have New Florence. You can see New Florence is closer to Johnstown than it is to Greensburg. New Florence was a creature of the Pennsylvania Railroad. The railroad came through Johnstown, then it came down following the Conemaugh, went down this road, went down following the river. And to point out the fact how closely New Florence is related to the railroad, the person who laid out the town of New Florence was a guy named Robert Given. Before Robert Given laid out the town of New Florence, he had worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad, laying out the arrangements for track, doing the survey work. He was a surveyor. And before he worked for the PRR, he had worked for the old Pennsylvania Public Works. He worked on the Portage Railroad project, which was back in the 30s, 1830s. This is New Florence in 1915. And we're going to get a look at some things right in the center of New Florence. We'll see this building here and this building over here. This was a hotel, and this was other stores. As it said, right on the corner of Ligonier and 13th Street. It was a big hotel built in 1888 by Sam Pershing. Before Sam did this building, he was a merchant. He had a store in New Florence. This is the same building once the third floor was taken off of it. And you see on the first floor there were stores. See this little building over here? That's what we see next. This was a tinner, a tin shop. You'd be surprised the things a tinner could do. Very few good tinners left. Now this is the place we were just looking at after the third floor had been removed. Next in our little journey, we're going to see this building right here. This was also on the corner of 13th Street and Ligonier in New Florence. These are places we were looking at right here. This was the train station in New Florence. This was taken before 1922 because in 1922 this passageway for cars was taken out and a underground. The road was put in underneath the tracks. And next we're going to see the this place right here. It was the Catholic Church in New Florence, probably the first church there, saying something about the fact that there were Italians in the area. I think the Italians had come, they were workers who had come to work on the building of the railroad and probably the canal before that. That's the building we were looking at, right here on Chestnut Street and 9th Street. Next we go up here to the corner of Ligonier and 7th Street. We're going to see this building first. That's the town hall, the borough building, and then we'll see the school building. It was the old building and the old school building in New Florence. That was the town hall. Someone said that it wasn't very pleasing aesthetically. Well, pretty hard to argue with that. The second floor was really a very open area where you could have large lectures, and it was so open you could have basketball games up there, and that stuff happened. The first floor is where they had meetings of the township government. There was also space to keep some of the fire department equipment in there. That was the school that I said we'd look at, built in 1922. And in 1940 it burnt down. It says it burnt down in 1942, but that's not correct. It actually burnt down in 1940. And now we're going to see the high school orchestra. I want to call them the band, but when you look at the instruments that they have, all these string instruments, that's not a band, that's probably an orchestra. This is one of the older businesses in town, a livery stable. J.A. Wagner was running this, and I worked on the photo a little bit and put some color on it. I think color always makes things a bit more interesting. You want to look at them. Wagner lived over here and had his livery stable right here. A lot of people don't know what a livery stable is or was. You might think about it by comparing it to the contemporary place where you can rent a car. But back before there were cars, there were horses and buggies. So if you pulled into New Florence on the railroad and you wanted to go out in the country and visit your relatives out on a farm, you went to the livery stable and you rented a horse, or maybe you rented a horse and buggy. This right here is where the livery stable was. That's on the corner of Ligonier Street and 10th Street. This is 9th Street. Now, where we're not, 9th Street went out to the west. There used to be, out here to the west of town, a brickyard, a place where they actually made bricks. This is Walnut Street coming down. Walnut Street used to come down. And there was once upon a time several important places. One was a lumber yard, the other was a feed mill. That's what I'm talking about. Tom Kirshner's planing mill. A planing mill is not a sawmill. A sawmill is a place where trees were cut up into boards, and a planing mill is a place where boards were made into more useful things like tables and chairs and windows and doors and all kind of things that were useful. Over here was the roller mills. These were mills, place where wheat was made into flour and other feed was collected and sold, the kind of feed for horses, and they also made flour for people. This was the town's first fire truck. It was in 1927 that they bought this used from the fire company up in Ebensburg, PA. This was the town cobbler, the guy who worked on your shoes. But back in that day, when Ephraim Hall, the guy in the door, when he was cobbler, the shoemaker actually did make shoes then. He didn't just fix them, he actually made shoes. This is the business directory of town. Interestingly, there were 2 doctors in town in 1867. All these guys here were working for the railroad. Over here you have various people working for, having stores. Sam Pershing was one of the guys who was the man who built that hotel that I showed you. These folks are from the 50s. The guys standing there are Joe McCartney, Dean Job, and Guy Geary. The girl in front was Claire Sutter. Claire was the sister of a man named Edward Sutter. Edward Sutter wrote a book on New Florence, the history of New Florence, which was very helpful to me in putting this together. It was a thing called New Florence Before My Time by Ed Sutter. And that tells us we've gone far enough. We've had our look at New Florence, and I thank you for coming along on the trip. And we'll have another trip to another community in Westmoreland County. And we'll see you again sometime. Bye now.